As chairman. Joining us now is Senator Judd Gregg, member of the Banking Committee, ranking member of the Budget Committee, and our guest host, Congressman Paul Kanjorski, still here. Senator Gregg,
Joe,
good to see you. Did you see the whole interview with the senator from Oregon?
I was driving through a beautiful snowstorm here in New Hampshire. Actually, it was a rainstorm, but we always call it snow anyway this time of year, so I didn't get to see it.
You could have heard it on Sirius, but Karmazin was so nasty to me that
can't afford those expensive.
Yeah, I'm not gonna plug it anymore. Anyway, his basic point was that Bernanke was there for when CDSs weren't regulated. When credit was when Greenspan was at 1% for way too long, didn't do anything about consumer protection. He was there and sat idly by as risk was ramped up and nothing was done. I think he said for the U.S. family, he said that about 10 or 15 times. Anyway, but how do you respond to that? Bernanke was there through all of the mistakes.
Well, I presume then that Jeff and the rest of the Congress are also going to resign because really, if you want to start laying blame around the table, Congress should get a big size of that, big chunk of that blame, because it was Congress which basically asserted policies which basically required financial institutions to go out and lend to people to buy homes which they knew they couldn't afford and which they knew they couldn't pay off because the interest rates were so low and would readjust, or because the people who were being given the opportunity to get these mortgages simply didn't have the capacity to pay the mortgages, and the houses were artificially highly appraised. And this was all, of course, done through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac being the seller or the buyer of these mortgages. And so, there's a lot of blame that can go around. I think what we should also acknowledge, if you're going to start blaming people, you also should credit people for things that they did right. Now, we were on the verge of a cataclysmic event in late 2008, and it didn't look good for us as a country. We were headed towards what was probably going to be a massive financial meltdown in all our institutions, and it would have had a huge impact on Main Street. Yes, we've been through a very serious recession, but you're talking about something that could have been on a depression type of level, and it didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? It didn't happen because the chairman of the Fed, along with the Treasury secretaries, both Paulson and Geithner, stepped in and did some really original things. And sure, they pushed the envelope, but if they hadn't pushed the envelope, the disaster which would have occurred would have been cataclysmic for us as an economy and for Main Street specifically. The way I describe it is this. It's like you're driving over a bridge and the bridge is about to collapse. And there's no way it's not going to collapse except that a guy comes along and fixes it before you drive over it. You keep going. You don't even know the bridge got fixed. Well, that's what happened here. Ben Bernanke came in with the Fed, put significant resources into the economy and basically into the financial structure, and stabilized the bridge so that the economy continued on. Granted, we've still had a recession, but I think you got to give him a lot of credit for having done a very good job during a really extraordinarily difficult time.
I know you've seen the metaphor. You don't, the arsonist puts out the fire, you don't give him a medal. That's what all this 20/20 hindsight.
Well, he's not the arsonist. He's not the arsonist.
That's what they're saying, Judd.
Yeah, well, that's pandering populism. Let's face it. There's a lot of populism going on in this country today, and I'm getting a little tired of it myself, because basically what it's going to do is burn down some of the institutions which are critical to us as a nation and our economy. For our economy to recover and to create jobs. I mean, this outrageous and continued attack on big just because it's bad, saying big is bad, is to me, where does that stop? Do we start disassembling Walmart because of the fact that they don't have unions? Do we disassemble McDonald's because they sell food that some people think makes them people fat?
Paul
how absurd is this? How absurd is it, Joe?
Yeah, is there a problem with that? Yes.
Jazz, let me tell
Joe, how absurd is it in a market economy, which depends on capitalism for its vibrance, to say that if you've got a vibrant, strong, large entity, it can't exist?
I can't answer that, but I know that the congressman probably... You can answer that, can't you?
We hope. Judd, Paul Kanjorski, first let me take the opportunity to congratulate you on a statesman-like stand on Bernanke. I agree with you. I was there in those late days in September and October, and if it hadn't been for Bernanke, Secretary Paulson, and the United States Congress that made some tough votes 6 weeks before an election, this country wouldn't be what it is today. But we've got a lot of work to do. And you did mention one of the things close to my heart, the Kanjorski Amendment. The Kanjorski Amendment, too big to fail, is trying to add another layer of protection before we get to the need to use the authority, the resolution authority or bankruptcy if we get to a crisis stage. And what we're attempting to do is inject in something very similar that you have in the communications field, that we don't allow one communications entity to own all of the entities. We're not allowing a bank that is so interconnected that could bring down the entire system. But we hope we'll never have to use that power. And further, you know, if you talk to even some of the major bankers of the world, they'll tell you, don't get into risky areas where you can't manage those areas, and it wouldn't be bad to have some controls in that area, and the regulator can nudge people along that way. Anyway, well, because I have such appreciation for you, I want you to study it and maybe argue it with you for a while to convince you that we need that as a,
all right.
as a
but
tool.
Let me make 2 points here, Paul, because you are a serious guy, and I appreciate what you've done on your side of the House. You've made a serious effort to try to address the whole issue of systemic risk. But there's 2 issues here. First, you've got this issue of proprietary trading. Let's put that in another side issue. That's a legitimate debate that we're going to have, obviously. But this issue of simply because you're large, we should set up a structure which allows people to come in and maybe break you up, even though you're healthy, even though you're well capitalized. I just have to tell you, I think it's very bad policy because, you know, we are a country that has a large banking system. We have a diverse banking system. We got 8,000 banks in this country or something like that. Some are small, some are medium-sized, some are large. Why do we need large banks that are healthy, well-capitalized? We need them because we're the largest economy in the world, and we have to compete internationally, and we have to have the capacity when our people go overseas to sell something to have a bank there to stand beside it. We don't want some bank from France or some bank from Switzerland taking their business. We want to be able to follow them overseas. That's one of the reasons why you need large institutions. There are other reasons too, obviously.
Well, I think we should debate that, but I think it's a legitimate tool on the continuum that we don't want to wait until we go into absolute crisis and have systemic risk.
Well, that's why I think this idea of having a risk board, which is made up of all the major people, and then you have a resolution authority if you see a systemic risk. If there's a risk, if there's an institution which has systemic risk because its capital's collapsed or it's made a huge series of bad investments, then you're going to have resolution authority, and clearly stockholders should be wiped out, bondholders should be wiped out, and you should resolve the thing. But if it's a healthy bank, I don't want to have 5 or 6 people sitting in Washington deciding whether healthy institutions can continue to exist, because I think you're going to end up with very market-distorting events when you have that sort of an oversight. It's going to be hard for them to raise capital, number one, because they've got this group in Washington that may affect their ability to function. But more importantly, you're going to have this overhang which makes our system less competitive with the European system, with the Singapore system, with the Chinese system. This is a world economy. We got to be the best place to create capital in the world. That's what we have to have, a financial system which generates an atmosphere where we're the place where people want to come and want to create capital. And you can't do that if you're undermining the confidence in your large institutions, which are healthy, large institutions which are healthy.
Senator Gregg, thank you.
Thank you
for coming on this morning. We appreciate it. See you later.
Always a pleasure.
We've got Phil LeBone.